If you're 100 pounds overweight, you still have value. You're still beautiful in your own right. All of these things as a human being. However, you are slowly committing suicide.
Welcome to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. And today I'm here with Ry Hickey. I'm excited for him. I'm excited to talk about nutrition and fitness and health and all of these different things that he's an expert in. I'm super excited for him to be here. First of all, before we get started, don't forget to go to maxedoutman.com. You can find other episodes of this podcast there and on Spotify, Apple, and anywhere else that you listen to your podcasts, which I think for most people, there's only those two, right? Spotify and Apple. But make sure you go there, check out the courses and the coaching and community and everything that we've got going on there. So hope you'll do that as well. I'm going to read Ry's very extensive bio that he gave me, which says collegiate athlete turned nutrition coach. So that's probably a record for the shortest bio that I've gotten on this show, which is great because that's, it's succinct. It tells exactly who you are and what you do. But if you can give us that backstory on who you are, how you got here, why you're doing what you're doing now, and just kind of fill this in because that helps give us the context, right?
It's nice to hold the belt now for the shortest bio on Maxed Out Man podcast. Thanks for having me, Kevin. The short, I guess a little bit more extensive bio for me is that I, like you said, was a collegiate athlete and got into sales for about a decade and kind of had this felt sense of not belonging in that profession and really like it was slowly sucking the life out of me. I've always been a very passionate guy, always been interested in nutrition and reasonably fit. And for that reason, had a lot of people in my vicinity come to me for advice. And at one point, I don't remember a very acute situation, but it was a fairly abrupt realization that I was preaching nonsense. It was like I was the one who was jumping from fad to fad and trying whatever was being promoted by the latest influencer, so to speak. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to start chipping away at this on the side. So while I was still in sales, I started getting certified with Precision Nutrition, did their level 1, really enjoyed that, started understanding the actual nutritional science as opposed to getting pulled in the various directions of the latest fad. And that led to taking on a few clients on the side and then doing their year-long level 2 certification. And that was probably maybe six years ago, and it snowballed. It became a full-time thing, and I have not looked back since, and I'm very grateful for that. So that's my background.
And that allows you, like, being a passionate person, what is it that you enjoy the most? Is it the programming side of things? Is it actual seeing that progress and seeing those light bulbs come on? What is it that kind of drives that for you?
That's a great question. And as much as I would love to bullshit you and say that it was just this
it's this huge altruistic, right?
Yeah, man. No, it wasn't. It was initially I think it was a very self-serving initiative. I knew I didn't like sales. I was like, I don't want to be a sales rep forever. And I had all this passion that was not being leveraged in the way that I knew I could. And so I had this vision of getting into coaching and maybe doing it online and having the flexibility to do it remotely. That was before the whole COVID craze. So my timing, I was very fortunate in my timing, to be quite honest, in terms of having that foresight to think I want to make this a remote thing. but it was self-serving. And then I got into it, and it was a beautiful and very challenging exercise of dealing with humans, which I did in sales, but not to the intimate degree that coaching is. It's such an intimate thing. You're getting right into the lives of the people that you're working with. And that is what spurred this deep passion or borderline obsession with just human behavior, because it actually transcended beyond nutrition. I realized that you can know all there is to know about nutritional science, but the most important piece is the relational piece and helping someone actually do what they already know they want to be doing, big picture, right? If you take any individual and say, list out 10 things that you think the most abundantly healthy and energized individuals do daily, that individual would make a list. And then if I said, how often are you doing those? Most people are doing like less than 5 of those things on the list. So people to a large degree know what to do. They just require a variety of different ways of looking at the way that they're interacting with their environment and the people within it. And that's my newest kind of passion. I've actually gone back to school for part-time to enhance what I already do, but I'm studying psychology because I have just like I said, a borderline obsession with human and animal behavior.
Yeah. And that's, it's funny that you talk about sales, right? And because ultimately almost everything we do in life is sales of one type or another, right? Because I'm trying to, even on this podcast, right? Like there is a subtle sales process in trying to connect with you over the, this podcast, and trying to connect you then with the listeners or the viewers or whatever. And so that process always fascinates me, because really at the end of the day, we're selling everybody. Kids sell their parents from the age of, as soon as they can manipulate us, which is basically out of the womb. And all of that, but we all do that. And so I think that's interesting, that if you were good enough to stay in sales for as long as you did, that probably actually transfers into what you do now, even though it's not salesy, right? Like I've got a buddy of mine that is like the consummate, like he was a pharmaceutical guy, right? Like, so like those guys are like salespeople on steroids, sometimes true, but just they're just crazy salespeople, right? So you have to tone them down. I'm always like, look, I don't do salesy, right? Like I do authentic connection and networking and all that stuff. And so, but I think that's the difference, because you can be the sales guy, and because you're selling them on this behavior change, but you don't do it from a sales standpoint.
Yeah, you're bang on. I think for me, it was, in hindsight, I don't know for sure. There's a lot of aspects of, our own cognition and psychology that I think we're wise to be skeptical of like memories and how we kind of, fall into the cognitive bias traps and so forth. In hindsight, I think I was a pretty shitty sales rep. and yet, to your point, when I got into something like coaching that I was very, very into, very passionate about, and literally consumed my life for a number of years. That's been the biggest challenge for me since transitioning into coaching, is striking that balance between when do I turn off and so forth. But that's when I was able to really leverage the social and relational and sales skills that I had developed as a sales rep over the years, but not to the degree in sales that I would have wanted to. It's just I've taken those and really leveled those up now that I'm coaching. And there's still always just an endless amount of improvements to be made and adjustments to be made for each individual, right? Everybody's so different.
Yeah, and I think that's that connection and actually quote unquote selling something that you truly believe in is such a different dichotomy than like, hey, here's this widget, right? Like I have this, and then I have multiple online e-com businesses, and so like it's this like, do I really want to sell this thing? Yeah, well, it helps keep the lights on, right? But that kind of thing. But if I'm helping someone and I can see someone go from like, hey, I'm on the brink of divorce, right? Like we're going to get divorced, and I can help that person, guy in this case, help that guy get out of and in this case, it was driven by that guy. And then to say, look, my wife and I are doing better. We're not perfect, but I'm no longer in that place that I was before. That now has been really cool and passionate for me. I think I told you this on our last call that we had some technical issues, so we had to reschedule. But my background actually has my degrees in exercise physiology, and I was a personal trainer, ran health clubs and all that. And as a personal trainer, I did like 11 or 12 clients a day, 5 days a week,
Wow.
which is way too many, by the way. But all of that is relational, right? And so, I wasn't the best trainer. I've never been the best at whatever I do, but the relational side is something that I really lean into. I remember this guy that was 91 when he started coming to me, and he literally could not sit up. If he laid on the floor, he had a very, very difficult time getting up off the floor. Like that was his baseline, right? And and after like literally like 8 weeks, he was doing crunches and he was doing reverse crunches and was able to kind of jump up off the floor. And like, I was like, this is amazing. And it showed what the human spirit can do, but it also shows what the human body can do.
Man, I mean, I'm very curious about your journey from your exercise science degree to training to where you are now. To your point though, I mean, I think that's in my space and your space, the one that you're, historically trained in. The deal. I'm sure you pay enough attention to the fitness and exercise and nutrition space to know that I'd say, especially in the fitness space, the exercise science space, oh man, you can just get so wrapped up in the weeds, and things change all the time. What's the rep range for optimal hypertrophy and all of this stuff? People overcomplicate things. And to your point and your example with that 91-year-old, it's like, you may think as a trainer, you got to know everything. And to be the best trainer, you have to have the most amount of knowledge. That is complete nonsense. It's like, if you have enough awareness and knowledge to do no harm to the individual, and then you have the social and relational skill set to get them bought in such that they're like, I like going to see Kevin, and he's, and you're adjusting that to suit his or her personality such that they keep showing up. I mean, that's, to me, what gets you in the upper echelon of the best trainer. It's not the individual who's spent years in the lab. Those, I mean, all of those various personalities within an industry or field, they work cohesively because some will gravitate more towards the research side, and those researchers will inform the boots on the ground individuals. I'll pay attention to a lot of the obviously nutritional scientists, and then I have to also put my own spin on things to some degree, because their vernacular and what they're discovering, I could repeat it verbatim to my clients and they'd be like, what did you just say? I have no idea. So you have to there's degrees to it, and it's sort of this, okay, now I take that information and think about how we can actually integrate it into a layperson's life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, here's this lipid molecule and lipase and lipose and all these different things. Like you're not gonna go explain that to someone when you're trying to explain, the basics of 9 calories per gram, 4 and 4, right? Like that. Exactly. That's not how you do it. But I think that's what they do. I think I graduated from college in 1995. And I started training in like 97. So this was like Tony Little, Susan Powder, and all this like low fat everything, which, everybody was bought into, right? Like that was, and what I think we miss is that was probably the beginning of our food quality just going to absolute crap, because that's when they started manufacturing food in a way that they could have it satiety, without the fat, right? They started throwing in sugar and more high fructose corn syrup and all this stuff. But all that to say, I'm a big fan of Lane Norton. I don't know if you listen to him too much, but he's kind of the governing bullshit detector for the fitness and nutrition industry at present. And I've known, I have a good friend of his, and I've met him, but I don't know him personally, but I'm always like, this is going to be good. The way he does deadlifts though is super weird. If you ever see his Instagram,
Sumo?
Yeah, but like he gets all that like super pumped and like running around doing his like nose, his like smelling salts and all that. Whatever works for you. But it's like, all right, I'll skip to the sciencey part. With Lane.
He likes to hype himself up for sure.
Yeah. But it's so crazy. I said back then, I was like, I wish I had no morals and ethics, because in the next 10 years, I could be a billionaire. Because all I have to do is, and I'm a marketer, right? So all I have to do is come up with a product that I can tell people does X, Y, Z, and they'll pay me $1 billion, right? Like but however, I can't say that because I know it's BS. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and we're going to continue to deal with this. And I think now the good thing for those kind of people is that there's so much information that it gets really easy to complicate something that's not that complicated.
Yes, totally. I mean, it's like Norton's a great example, and I agree with you. He's kind of at the forefront of the myth and misinformation debunking online, because it's just so prevalent. It's like create fear around something and then have, build up that audience with very polarizing, fear-mongery messages, and then have a product that solves that problem, like a supplement or a program or something. And people are very successful at that from a monetary standpoint. And I'm with you in terms of not being able to bring myself ever to, make claims that an actual scientist would be like, that is nonsense, What was like, I'm curious what that transition into marketing was like for you. What do you market now?
So I have 9 brands at the moment. Oh, wow. So most of them I have a couple of patents on some physical products in different industries. We sell off-road products, and then I sell information products, basically with Maxed Out Man. That's kind of the information side of things. I had a vacation rental course that I did. And so, but it's, a lot of it is physical products at this point. But I could never bring myself to say, hey, lose 50 pounds. First of all, the shake weight is the greatest example of marketing of all time. Yeah. The fact, I gotta think they did that crap on purpose. And if you don't know what the shake weight is, please go look it up. If you're under the age of like 35,
solve all your problems.
Yeah, jacked is a funny name, funny word to use. Using in that case. But yeah, so my transition out of the fitness industry was kind of interesting because I was a personal trainer, super successful. I got my first major club, and I had 2 of them at like 23 years old. And so I was running health clubs at 23. But that's like, if anybody that's spending time in the fitness industry, it's not family friendly. It's 5 to 9, 11 to 1, and 5 to 9. Like those are your hours, which basically means it's 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. is your day. And so when my wife got pregnant, I had an opportunity to go work for a company early on in the technology meets fitness field. And so we moved back east, and I helped grow that startup. And this was back in the .com days and all that. But that kept me in the fitness industry for a long time. And then I kind of exited out of that. But that was a fun transition into doing something in fitness, in technology, and kind of putting those things together.
Very cool. Nice, man. Yeah, it is. It is. That seems to be such a common theme with the personal training. It baffles me at how many, I would think, amazing trainers eventually just had to exit the industry because the hours are just absurd, right? Who can sustain long term like a split shift where your
Yeah.
only free time is a chunk in the middle of the day? It's just very, unless you're running a gym and doing it with your partner and you make it work or whatever, it's just it's a difficult thing, which is why it's neat now with the online world. I kind of skipped the whole, like, I am a certified personal trainer, but I skipped the whole, doing a extensive bout of personal training. I worked in group fitness and ran a few group fitness classes and did some personal training, but I just always had this, because I was late to the party. I wasn't like a 20-year-old getting into personal training. I was a 30-year-old making this scary transition and leaving my golden handcuffs with a comfortable paycheck in sales. I was like, yeah, I don't want to go. I'm not going to go and just, like, this is too big of an opportunity online to make it feasible and sustainable and relatively normal hours. So I went that route.
Well, and good on you for that. I mean, that's super smart. Because I mean, like, dude, like I said, I'm doing 12 clients a day. I'm a glorified spotter for the most part.
Yeah.
However, one of the things as a trainer, and I think one thing that gets a lot of people, both online and in person, is just you give a little. Just it's almost like you become there's a lot of counseling involved, right? Like, I had women that were having trouble in their marriage, which, if you're a personal trainer and that happens, be super careful about those discussions, by the way. Like, I had to super have my guard up. But you give a little piece of yourself all day long. And so then by the end of the day, like, there's not much left to give to anybody. It's a great single person's job. I can't imagine trying to do it, as a newly married, and which is why I got out of it. But, trying to maintain relationships and all of that is just seems super difficult for sure. The online stuff, I mean, is so awesome now. Like, I would have loved to be able to do what you're able to do now back in the day. Cause it's just, talk to me about like how that online process works and what you like about it, what you don't like about it.
Good question. And I would say the online process, when done effectively, fills in a lot of the gaps that personal training misses in terms of continual accountability. I'm sure you had this experience, because so many personal trainers do, where you get into it to affect change in people. And so if I'm training Bob or Sue for 12 straight months, yeah, we develop an amazing rapport. But if they're not managing their behavior and nutrition outside of that 1 hour session 3 times a week that we do in the gym, then we're not going to see the progress that they want to see and you want to see for them. So online, using systems, and as long as the individual has some degree of technological savviness, and there's ways around that too. I've worked with some older clients and found ways to kind of make it work. Then you can have that sense of like, hey, the accountability and the program and the goal doesn't go away when I leave the gym. It's still going. And I have my check-in with Ry, and we continually message, and you know what I mean? So there's ways to, it's different for everybody, but I use like a weekly check-in process. And, that includes like a form where they fill out that gives me sort of a, pulse check on what their last week entailed, what's coming up for them, what makes sense, how adherent were they to various nutrition targets, habit guidelines and so forth. And then you combine that with messaging, you combine that with technology that allows you, there's some pretty cool stuff, as I'm sure you know, out there with delivering workout programs and nutrition parameters, and then this Zoom, like, or video calls, one-to-one connection is something that I think that I myself, as an early coach online, tried to kind of like, systematize everything and swung too far on that end. And I think there was a lot of flash in the pan influencers online who made a ton of money selling a templated program with like zero client contact and all systematized stuff. I think moving forward in this day and age, at least for the next few years, it's changing so fast, but I do see there still being a space for a higher end, like more expensive, one-to-one individualized program where it's me because I'm showing up on this call and I'm saying, hey, Kev, tell me how the week went. Did your feedback make sense? Walk me through what that's going to look like specifically in terms of managing your challenges on the weekend or your sleep issues or whatever it may be that we've honed in on and think is the biggest opportunity to move you in the direction you want to go. So that, I think people have been burned a lot with that sort of, man, I signed up and then didn't hear from the guy or just got a bunch of automated messages and it didn't feel like it was an actual person there. I think that's kind of where it's going. So what I don't like about it is the lack of, in-person connection. Like, I'm very transparent about that. It's a bit of a lonely gig. I think for any remote worker, you have to be cognizant of getting your social fix outside. And for me, I don't love categorizing myself or others, but I would say I probably default more towards the introverted side. If left to my own devices, I do kind of like, default to time alone. So I have to be very extra conscious of, going out and seeing people in person. And because I don't necessarily get that. It's a bit different on a video call than it is being right there in front of them,
Yeah, that's gotta be a big challenge. I always say I'm an introvert that plays an extrovert on the internet. That's like my, cause I really am more introverted, but I turn it, what I call turning it on, right? Like you can, which all of us do. But not in a false way, but just that allows me to give more energy towards that. But yeah, as an introvert, and I've worked out of my house for 25 years. So I totally understand, what you're saying. And we have long winters here, like you do in Canada. And, it's just all of that stuff, right? You got to be very deliberate, about it. Talk to me about the accountability piece, right? So one thing that's interesting, like I actually am working with I have regularly, right? And it may surprise some people, but like I know what to do, but I work with coaches and personal trainers to help me do the things I know what to do. Right. And that's the accountability piece of that. So I want you to talk about that, but I did want to say, to your point, essentially a lot of these guys are just giving people math equations, right? All right. So it's 40, 30%. It's 10 calories per pound of body weight. It's 1 to 1.3 grams per pound, per pound of body weight. It's like all right. So basically you're just giving me math to do.
Yeah.
And like I don't, that doesn't really help me. It kind of helps set the basic parameters, but so feel free to comment on that. But I'm curious about the accountability piece, because we were talking about human behavior before. I'm a guy that I know what to do. I know what to eat, what not to eat, what's beneficial to me, what's not beneficial. But my wife is a baker. And so dude, and she suffers, she goes through the same thing. Cause I love sugar. Like I don't drink or smoke or do caffeine. I do caffeine, but I don't do anything else. But sugar is my drug. So I need that accountability that if I'm going to put that thing in my mouth, I have to tell someone that I put that thing in my mouth, not Not that it's always a bad thing, but if it's not helping me get closer to my goals or keep me at my goals, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, it's like, I'll give you as concise as I can. I'll probably fail at that, as I usually do. But
We got plenty of time.
Awesome. So the way that I try and think about it, I do, to be completely transparent. I mean, I think about this a ton, because my goal when I do work with someone is, hey, this might take a year, it might take 3 years, but like my goal is for you to eventually have such a strong grasp of progressing through the various stages of, behavioral awareness, to understanding that what your food is comprised of, to being consistent and, adherent and executing a plan, a fairly detailed plan for X amount of months until you hit your goal, and then sustaining that progress, I should say. But I guess my basic thoughts are like, so I'm a big fan of self-determination theory, which is like a sub-theory of psychology, and it states that for a fulfilling life, a human being needs to feel competent in what they're doing. They need to feel like they have a sense of autonomy and a sense of relatedness. So the autonomy aspect is, I think, tied most closely to the accountability piece, because a lot of people, and I do think that to some degree, we all need some form of accountability. There's just no getting away from that, because coaches get coached. Mm-hmm. And to your point, it's like, I'm the exact same way. Like I can't just set a goal for no reason and mm-hmm. be like, I'm going to get shredded by myself and not tell anybody about it. and just like, I need something, right? I've got a work retreat for the company that I consult for, I coach for, Suprahuman, in Arizona coming up. So I'm currently in the throes of like pretty, deprivation level calories for me. And would I be doing this if I didn't have this like pool party with a bunch of my colleagues who are shredded and jacked? No, absolutely not. That's enough accountability for me to do that. But the autonomy piece, I think, can be worked at such that, at least viewing everything on a spectrum, some feel like they have to have some goal just to keep things at like a baseline of health. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't ever push myself to get really, really lean, because arguably past a certain point, it's actually not really that healthy to look amazing by today's standards in the fitness industry. The people you see on a bodybuilding stage are not healthy at that point. They're in a terrible, terrible physiological state. Like, yeah, we all know.
If you want to beat one of those people up, by the way, that's like, do it between like 10 days and 0 days of a show. Cause like they literally have no energy whatsoever. You could steal from them. You could push them over. You could do whatever you want to them because they have no energy.
100%. They look powerful, but they're vulnerable. They're like children at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess if I were to take, like, I have typically worked with kind of general population clients. And so for them, there is an opportunity to help them shift eventually. And I talk about this from the starting phase. If someone has really let their health slip to the point where they're, extremely overweight or obese, they, yes, will leverage accountability in the beginning, but I'm also going to tell them up front and say, my goal for you is to develop your autonomy so that you're making these decisions on your own. And as a practical example, a lot of people will say, I ask this a lot, like, how can I support you in accomplishing this? If we have a conversation and you say, okay, I see why I want to do this behavioral change. I know how it's connected to my objective. here's what I'm going to do specifically. Here's the steps involved. And then the last kind of piece being like, okay, how can I support you in doing that? A lot of them will say something like, message me every day, or stay on me, like whip me. It's like, and my response to that is, I care about you too much to do that. And the reason is because if I do that, you become reliant on my being there, my accountability, your commitment to me. And that's long term going to completely sewer you to the point where once you transition out of being coached, I'm no longer there. So what do you do then? This is why people lose a bunch of weight and then leave the program. They do some challenge and then they regain more weight, because all of those little bits of daily or weekly or bi-monthly rewards and reinforcement, positive reinforcement from their coach or whatever, those are all removed at once. And so I try to think about things from like a big picture standpoint in saying, let's leverage accountability in the beginning so they know, hey, Ry's watching and I'm paying attention to what I'm eating now. I'm paying attention to how I'm moving and behaving and so forth. But eventually we're going to taper down the amount that you or my client like rely on my touch points, such that their autonomy is more and more strengthened. So that eventually I feel confident and they feel confident to just go off and at least remain at that baseline health. And then if they were to say, I want to get really ripped for, a vacation or something, then I can obviously help them for 3 to 6 months prepare for that, because accountability is going to be pretty essential at that point.
Yeah, I love the accountability and autonomy thing, right? Because I was just, as you were talking about that, it started to, my mind was like, most of these people are just changing, they're trading their addiction for food to an addiction to coaches, to an addiction to a challenge, to an addiction to a program or supplement or whatever. And so they're just shifting their addiction focus, because then they become addicted to you as a coach. If they want, it's like, hey, I need you to check in with me every day, and that doesn't help them, right? Because they have to kill the addiction and that addictive part of their personality, and it's one of those weird deals, right? Like, do you want people to be addicted to healthy food and nutrition and weight training? Maybe a little. I'd rather them be addicted to that than Oreos. But like I love that autonomy piece. That's super interesting to see how you really work towards, because it's counterintuitive as a business person, right? To say, what I want you to do is I basically want you to put me out of a job over the next, like I want you not to need me anymore. Yeah,
totally. I say that in the beginning. I say, I'm in the referral business, not the recurring business. It's like, and you know what? Again, man, I'm an open book. It's like, this stuff is complex. Human beings we're so nuanced and complicated. I don't know if myself, like, again, I think to some degree I've accepted for myself that I'll always want a coach of some sort. So I've kind of just accepted that the type of coach maybe will differ depending on what I'm interested in or what area I see a big opportunity for my own personal or career development. But yeah, I mean, we're social beings. Like if everyone were to be wiped off the face of the earth, I can't say honestly that I would be motivated to do a lot of the stuff that I do. Like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of, it's like acknowledging the fundamental aspects of being human. We do care what others think of us. I think it's wise to be selective with what type of person you want to have, their respect, as opposed to just being vague and trying to appease everybody, and being upset when someone's, especially in the online world, as you would know, it's like you're just going to face that kind of stuff. But yeah, to some degree, I'm always going to need some level of accountability. I've just accepted that. And that's almost a freeing realization, as opposed to this, well, I should be able to do this on my own by now. I know all these things. I'm a gosh darn coach, man. Like, what am I doing? Then it just spirals into this self-judgment, self-deprecating sort of whirlwind, as opposed to just being like, hey, I'm human. I'm going to still continue to face challenges and learn new things when I go on vacation, and I'm in various high stimulus environments and so forth. It's just an ongoing thing. It's like the infinite game, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to follow up on that, let's talk about like more fitter individuals like yourself, and what drives us. Because right now I'm probably 6-7 weeks into a cut. So I'm cutting, I'm working my ass off. I'm doing 2.5 hours of something every day, and so, which I don't recommend. Just like you wouldn't recommend doing what you're doing right now in order to get ready for this retreat, right? But how does that equate to people that are like us? And I don't say this with any ego whatsoever, but high performing people that kind of maintain a certain level of health and fitness. What motivates us to go above and beyond? Because for me, just personally, I'll say I'm 51 years old, and I want to see what I can push my 51-year-old body to do, because I know for a fact that physiologically there are some challenges. However, my physiological response should should equate to a 25-year-old, quote unquote. If it may change, the protocols may be different, but my body wants to do certain things if I force it to do that. And I have this mantra: I am the boss of my body. My body is not the boss of me. It's like I tell myself whenever I sore or don't want to do what I'm supposed to do and all that. But all that to say, I'm curious how that equates to what you see with the typical person behavior, and kind of that motivating factor. And I will say, I don't think either of us are in danger of losing opportunities to coach and help people, given that we're like 65% obese now, and it just keeps getting, as a society. But I'm curious about your thoughts about that. Kind of what motivates you to get ripped for this pool party? What motivates me to, because I really have to do before and after pictures, because I want to show men that you can do it. Like if you're 40 pounds overweight and sitting on the couch at 50 and saying, I'm 50, this is what 50 looks like, right? Like I want to dispel that, but I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. First of all, man, kudos to you. You do not look 51. That's awesome. I guess I'm similar to what I would have said before. I'm super just open. And I think that there's, in today's culture, I'm cautious of saying this because we're all so biased, right? It's like, what is the algorithm feeding me? And what am I seeing within my tiny sample size? We all get so, influenced by what we're delivered online, especially these days. And then also just what we have minimal exposure to from a broad global standpoint. But it seems like in society, in today's, at least Western culture, vanity has this very negative connotation. I always write down content ideas for my videos and stuff. And I just wrote down one this morning that it's like, stop saying that you don't care how you look.
Right.
Right. It's like, this is so deeply ingrained into us. Like, we do care how we look, right? We're just wired to make snap judgments. And that doesn't mean, people think that means we just jump to being this like narcissistic, vain, completely vain, self-absorbed asshole, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't, there's degrees to this stuff. I can care how I look and still be a very compassionate person and still make certain, sacrifices and choose not to make certain sacrifices where I'm actually, damaging my long-term health or neglecting loved ones within my life because of my own obsession with how I look. Like, obviously you can go too much of anything is probably not good. So I guess to answer your question, the simple fact is that, I do care how I look. I do care how I am, how I conduct myself in the context of social settings. I care about my reputation. I care about what people who I look up to think of me. So for that reason, it just so happens that I've, ended up in this position doing the work that I do. And to call a spade in my world, to be able to really push the limits of body composition and physique development, it does give you an undeniable level of credibility. So it's like, okay, I can talk about a bunch of things that apply to the general population. And I can also say, hey guys, I've also gotten pretty damn ripped. Like, I've taken myself to that degree just to kind of know what that's like. If you want to do that, if that's a goal of yours to have a six pack, I can help you get there. It might take a long time, but here's how we would go about doing that. It just broadens the amount of people that I can work with as well. But I also kind of think of things in stages in terms of being like, well, where is this person at along that spectrum of, being 40% body fat and just needing some like basic consistency around their meal timing. If they were to just have, reasonably high protein meal 3 times a day consistently, they're going to see results. That's very different from the individual who's looking to get a six pack. They got to be far more cognizant of all of their behavior. And I think I just also gravitate towards the neat and undeniable aspect of doing difficult shit. I mean, how many things do you remember that were just easy and comfortable, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer to living the most fulfilling life is. It's probably different for every individual, but at the end of the day, for me, I think when I'm 70 or 80 or 90, I'm not gonna, wish that I shied away from doing challenging things like getting super lean and pushing yourself to a level of discomfort.
Yeah, because it sucks. Like, for the people here that are listening that have never done that, and I mean, I've gone from, I've been, and you can go on my website and see it, I've been 3.5 or 4% body fat, and I actually carry more muscle now than I did my total weight at that point, which honestly, that's not that different. But to like 210 pounds and 25% body fat and just fat, right? Like, and I'm vain. Main reason I work out, I always tell people that it's like, first of all, like people that say, oh, I love running. First of all, you're crazy. And secondly, if you see anyone running almost at any time, they're never happy. They don't look happy. They may like how it benefits their body and all that. Anyway, there
are periods of that runner's high. It'd be very, if you see them in very infrequent and short-lived bouts of that endorphin run, then maybe. But I would agree with you, from like 95% of that period that they're running, it's just pure suck.
Yeah, I mean, we did 3 marathons and a bunch of half marathons, just again because we wanted to show that we could do it. Like that was
right.
And side note, that's also the fattest point of our lives. Like that, it's a
You're
really
saying
weird,
who's the
my
other?
my wife and I.
Okay, cool.
But like because there's this, and this is a weird psychology thing. When you're doing the training, and we would go do 18-mile runs as part of our training.
Mm-hmm.
You give yourself permission to eat way more than you need to. So that was always super interesting, because I'm like, if you look at the fattest time of my life, it was when I was burning the most calories, on a regular basis. So anyway, all that to say, to your point, John F. Kennedy, when he was talking about the space program back in the day, there's that famous quote where we want to do these things not because they're easy, but because they are hard. right? And that's a great statement. Joe Rogan talks about his cold plunge stuff, which is, I gotta, basically tell myself to stop being a little pussy, tell myself this is how I quelch my inner bitch, and all of the, all of that little stuff. And so that showing people that you're able to do it has that credibility. We do a lot of stuff in the detailing industry. That's one of my products. And if a detailer shows up at, a client's house in a, 84 Civic that's missing a side panel and looks like crap, that's the same as being a fat trainer or, because there's an aesthetic component, right? And there's a credibility component.
For sure there is, man. And like with that, it's funny because I waffle with that. Again, full disclosure, it's like there are some individuals in the exercise science and nutritional science field who are arguably in the upper echelon of the most brilliant. Like they know the most. It's almost like this compensatory effect for the fact that they don't look the part to the degree that you would expect them to, right?
Right.
For me, I would like to, and I have done this, like I would like to think that I'll continue to be as aware as I can. I don't think I can ever be fully aware, but as aware as I can of my own inherent bias and, animal programming of being like, I see this individual, they're the most jacked at the gym. They know what they're talking about. I know that's not the case. Like you can see, similar to what I had mentioned with my own journey, it's like I was reasonably fit. I've never been, to your point, like I've never been the best at anything that I've done, really. I've been like really good at a lot of things athletically and so forth, but never the best. And I was spewing total nonsense and like unaware of it. And you see that all the time in the gym with some of the big guys who just started running gear or have crazy genetics, and they're jumping on all the fads, and the young bucks are going to them saying, hey man, what are you doing? And they're just like spewing utter nonsense, as opposed to, in a lot of cases, the slightly overweight or skinny person who's actually immersed in, the exercise science realm, who can be like, well, these are the fundamentals. Are you sleeping okay? Are you progressively overloading some basic compound movements? Are you getting enough protein? Are you managing your overall energy intake? Beyond that, it's like, okay, that person could give a lot better advice, but there is a threshold, of course. Like it's like to your point with your beat up Civic, that's going to make anybody go, what's going on here? Just as the same as like, if I'm not going to hire a broke financial advisor, right? So
right.
There's again, degrees to this stuff. And I think it's very nuanced. It's like on a very individual basis. If someone does not look the part in my space, it's like, I better know, okay, tell me, like, what are your credentials? How do you plan to help me? I probably would be a little more skeptical than I would of someone who really looks the part, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even someone like Andrew Huberman, who probably meets both of those things, right? Like the dude's just jacked, but he's got great genetics, but he friggin' brilliant guy, but he also looks the part, which gives him a certain amount of credibility. The irony thing in the detailing space that I was talking about is that some of these guys are getting out of beautifully maintained vehicles, but they're 100 pounds overweight. Their t-shirts don't fit, their guts hanging out that the client can see. And like, they're not equating like, and that's one of our goals, right? Like as coaches, we want to help people recognize that those two things are asynchronous, right? Like, why aren't you taking care of your body in the same way that you take care of this vehicle? Because I could tell you now that vehicle will outlast you by a long shot if you don't do something about your body and your habits and all of that.
Yeah, man. Again, with this stuff, I waffle a fair bit more than I'd like to admit, to be honest, because I'm just so skeptical of my own bias again. So I try not to like impose that thing. But the facts of the matter are, if someone is, let's say, really overweight, I have such compassion for that person because there's just, it's so complex. Like obesity is so complex. And when you dig into the actual science, it's like, whoa, this is where all the influencers are like, just eat less. It's a total decision. It's like, bro, you don't understand the nuance and the complexity of, you know, food deserts and early childhood programming and all of this stuff. It's so multifactorial. But the fact of the matter still remains. It's like it does show at that point, certain inability to manage one's behavior. Nobody wants to be in that physical state. So I think that in my field, there's a big opportunity to kind of bridge the gap between those who are just like, shame-based influencers and individuals who want to, and they very well may want to help. It's just like what they've been reinforced to think is effective, right? And then bridging that gap between someone who can be like, okay, I don't know what it's like to be morbidly obese. That's got to be so challenging, right? And yet there is a massive opportunity there to start working with certain cognitive reframes and interacting differently with your environment, modifying your environment, auditing your relationships, and doing a bunch of very difficult work that will allow them to start moving in the direction that they want to go.
Yeah, we're in a really weird time. I was, doom scrolling on TikTok this morning before I jumped out of bed, which is a terrible habit, by the way. But I keep, because I stopped and watched one video, now I have to see all of them. But there's these what they call them, fatfluencers, right? And so there's one in particular that is an advocate. She basically wants the airlines to give her double seats for free, and that's her whole shtick, right? And so then, everybody comments, and you can predict what the comments are, right? But, one guy's like, I'm 6'5", I don't fit in a normal airline seat, I have to buy first class. Like, this is, why don't I get that treatment or whatever, But it seems like that we're now going to approach this dichotomy, this like we couldn't be more divisive as a species right now, but like you're going to get more of that divisiveness. It's like if you just, because there's a certain amount of compensation on her part as the influencer, because she's justifying what is, because she's like 450 pounds. Like we're not, and 5'6", we're not talking about someone that's a little overweight. She literally can't go down a plane aisle without turning sideways.
Right.
And so like and so there's this whole psychology involved and all that. But I almost think it's going to get worse, because now we have we've been told that you have to be, fit, and now it's okay to be fat but it's like, it's just a weird time.
It is so weird, man. Yeah, I agree. And it's like, it's so difficult. It's classic, I think, human tendency, right? We overcompensate. You mentioned earlier about the low fat craze, and then just making things really tasty with a bunch of sugar, but hey, there's zero fat. And then what did we do? We swung to keto phase, right? Mm-hmm. Carbs are the enemy. And we continue to like do this flip flop. It's wild. We just overcompensate. So again, I'm like super skeptical of my own interpretation of what's going on in society. 'Cause, whether it's like, the trans discussion or obesity acceptance or whatever, it's like there are good examples in all of these, right? There are like individuals who are rational and like, and accepting and wanting to kind of bridge the gap and not create this divisiveness. Like any movement, name a movement, right?
Yeah.
There's just those who take it too far, it gets too extreme, and then it creates this divisiveness, and then those of us who are not really involved in it see the polarizing figures saying what they're saying. And it makes us kind of be like, well, that's pretty extreme. And in most cases it is. It's like way too extreme, you know? So yeah, it's this like very difficult time for sure. And the obesity thing is, it's just like the facts of the matter is, it's going to cause early death. Mm-hmm. So like, if you're okay with that, then, you know, to each their own. But to some degree, there has to be this sense of like ownership. And there's so many examples of people who were morbidly obese and they lost 50, 100, 200 pounds plus. Like they made the decision to do that. And as far as we can tell now in psychology and neuroscience and whatever else, there's no like pinpointed thing that says, well, that's why this person was able to do that, because they have this genome, or, you know, they had this particular environment and this is why these people can't do that. But because you hear so many people who kind of just, they victimize themselves, man. I'm very sensitive to that. And as much compassion as I do have, that's the thing that I hate most in myself, and has been the biggest journey for me, is like, oh, poor me. Like I have the tendency to victimize myself. And so I'm very sensitive to it in others. And when I hear that, it's like, man, that's not going to help you. Like I care about you too much to let that just slide by. Like that, thinking like that is not going to help you. You have to take some sort of agency over where you're at. Were you responsible for where you were born, how you were raised, the things that happened to you? No. Like, no, but you are where you are. And so a certain level of just acceptance and agency around no one's coming to save you. The only person that can make these changes is you. And a lot of that starts with the cognition side.
Yeah. I mean, you know, to be full disclosure on the whole thing, right? Like my desire and drive to get to sub 6% body fat, right? That's not healthy. And you said it at the very beginning. That's not healthy. It's not sustainable. I can do it for a certain amount of time. I want to make sure that I'm doing it in a holistic way that I continue. And truth be told, over the last couple of weeks, I've had to make adjustments because I'm like, I feel like crap all the time. This is stupid. And so I cut back a little bit on my workouts, you know, took more rest days, added, you know, a couple hundred calories back into what I was doing, you know, all these adjustments, right? And I think then it, you know, so that's not healthy, but then and hopefully no one is saying that's healthy. And also no one should be saying that this fitness model looks like this 365 days a year, or this bodybuilder, that's BS. They got that way for a shoot and they, you know, didn't sustain it. You know, it's healthier to be, you know, put on what 9 or 8, 9, 10% or whatever for a guy. It's probably a little bit more sustainable depending on your genetics. But now they're like, yeah, I'm 450 pounds and this is the way I am and I'm happy. I would call bullshit on that, you know, because if you've ever carried 10 or 15 extra pounds, like you feel the difference when you take those 10 pounds off. I can't imagine that number being 250 pounds.
Oh,
extra,
man.
You know, or what you eat, right? Like if I travel and I forgot to pack food or whatever, and I have to go eat McDonald's, like, or whatever, I know that that's probably going to taste really good if you like that sort of thing, which you know, it's made to make it taste good. I know I'm going to feel like crap for the rest of the day because I don't normally put that many chemicals in my body. And I think to myself, if I have to do that for a couple of days, I'm like, is this what people feel like all the time? And they don't even know that they feel this way. Like you don't know what it feels like to eat healthily on a sustained basis. And like, I love that we talked about psychology in the beginning and human behavior because it's super fascinating to me as well.
Yeah, man. Like to your point, I think that probably is the case for so many people. They just don't know. How would you know? Yeah. the only experience any human in history has ever been aware of is their own. Surely we're wired very similarly, so there's going to be a ton of overlap. But I don't know what it feels like to be anybody but myself, right? So, and to your point, pushing beyond the limits and doing certain things, you go, whoa, okay, that was a new door that was opened. And so that's what can be this kind of funny paradox of being in my industry and being someone who really wants to help. It's like a bit of the coach's paradox. The more I can't care more than you care if you come to me and want to do certain thing. Like some people do have, and I have to be really cautious as the coach to be aware of feeding into that sense of like, okay, I've paid for your services. Now fix me, man.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, whoa, no. I'm not using we. I'm not saying we're going to do this. It's like, you're going to do this. I'm pushing responsibility back on you because I care about you, big picture. Again, back to the accountability, autonomy piece. But it is also this thing of, just not being aware. And so you're like, as somebody if you got a client who's even 50 pounds overweight, it's like, man, I can't wait for you to feel what it's like to strip that 50 pounds off.
Yeah.
I get excited thinking about it. It's like, wow. To your point, I know what it's like to be 20 pounds, 30 pounds overweight. And I feel super light when I've stripped that off. It's like,
Right.
holy shit, my heart rate goes down. I pay attention to various metrics. My sleep improves. I want to move more to a certain degree of leanness, right? But yeah, it's that interesting thing of, I think fundamentally for a lot of those people, it's like, you got to be curious, right? You don't got to be, but it's just like, I would hope that, again, from a compassionate standpoint, the morbidly obese person, you haven't tried everything.
Right.
You just haven't, right? People say, I've tried everything. No, you haven't. You haven't tried everything. I've got problems. I've got challenges. And I continuously try and think, well, what do I think I know that I might not be aware of? Whether it's relational difficulties or, psychological stuff, bouts of depression, whatever may be, anxiety, like all these things. I have not tried everything. That's a all or nothing, total magnify, like in cognitive psychology or cognitive therapy, that would be considered like amplification or magnification or absolute thinking, right? It's like, no, you haven't tried everything. So that complacency foundation is probably the big opportunity to say, yeah, let's try and increase acceptance while also removing barriers to entry in terms of helping that person move towards a healthier them.
Right. Yeah. Because and I think a lot of times what we're seeing now is people are somehow trying to equate value, personal value, and beauty with acceptance, or even even trying to glorify it. Right. So what I mean is, if you're 100 pounds overweight, you still have value. You're still beautiful in your own right. All of these things as a human being. However, if whatever behavior that you're having, and like you said before, it's like, it's a huge spectrum of how this works. You are slowly committing suicide. It's not healthy. Your value and your health are two different things in this case. So if you're listening to this and that's who you are, please reach out to Ry or someone else that may fit your, whoever that is. It's not okay for you to try to sustain that, because it's not sustainable long term. We know that. Like, that's the data. It's like saying that if I just drive slowly enough, I will never run out of gas in my tank, even if I've never put any more in, right? There are just some very specific truths about how things work, and that's one of them. If you're 100 pounds overweight, 50 pounds overweight, you are increasing your all-cause mortality, exponentially in a lot of cases.
Totally, man. And just as a quick add-on to that, the beauty this day and age of the online training and nutrition coaching world is the accessibility to such a broad plethora of professionals. In the past, an overweight or obese person who's fearful of the gym would go to the gym and have to spend a lot of money to hire a personal trainer. And you're totally like, nobody travels a significant distance to go to a gym. And then you're subject to a small sample size of trainers. An obese person might get me and go, you don't know what it's like. And I think that, again, for me, it's like, that's something I continually try and override. I can learn things and gain value and be coached and guided and improve myself from somebody in a totally different walk of life. But in these gradations of severity on the extreme end of like obesity, it probably is the case that there's some level of, victimization there or extreme self-degradation, such that it would make them hard to connect with someone like myself who's never been morbidly obese. I've never known what it's like to get winded up a flight of stairs or need 2 seats on an airplane. But here's the beautiful thing. In this day and age, you have access to someone who has and is now at a healthy body weight. I follow a lot of these guys who've lost, and girls who've lost 100 pounds plus. So like, if you do feel the need to have someone who's been in your position, if you are on that extreme end of, obesity or overweightness, you've got access to people who have been where you've been and you can really relate to, and they're going to probably help you. Arguably, the fundamentals are still there, and I can help people and have helped people in that, obese genre. But I would argue maybe there's definitely a lot of people who could do an even better job than I could, because they know what it's like to be in that position,
Yeah, that is the one huge thing with what we've got going on now, is that, even in the space that I am with men's coaching and all that, it's like I'm not for everybody. My style, my sometimes abrasiveness, I'm too sarcastic, whatever those things are, right? Like, not everybody's going to resonate with that. But the good news is there's probably 100 more coaches out there that are going to be a better fit for you. And so that's great advice. I love that. I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to take you back real quick to, you said that if there's a list of things that let's take 2 things. Let's take like general fitness and then nutrition, right? If there are 3 or 4 things that high performing individuals focus on, or behaviors that they do, can you give me those lists? So let's start with fitness, right?
Love it. Okay. 3 or 4 things. With fitness, it would be a certain amount of overall movement, and the easiest metric to measure that would be a step count. Like, I wear a Fitbit. Is there a threshold? It's interesting in the literature in terms of Yeah, actually, I won't get into that. There's a bunch of interesting nuance there. I would say for most, desk jockeys or like the average Western worker who's at a desk most of the day, getting them somewhere in the range of 7,500 to, 12,000 plus steps a day is a reasonable ballpark. So seeing where you're at and then progressively increasing towards that kind of baseline and making sure you do that daily, like consistently. Mm-hmm. So a certain amount of movement, certain amount of strength training, I would say at least twice a week in that kind of 2 to 5 or 6, I would say for most general population. I don't know what your demographic is, Kevin, but probably for if it's general pop, it's like 2 to 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And also acknowledging where you're at, like if someone's not been consistent with working out and they say, I can do 5 days a week, start at 2 or 3 and then prove to yourself you can do that for months, if not years, right? So a certain amount of movement, a certain amount of resistance training. Cardio, I think, is really good for your heart. Mm-hmm. I think it's really good. There's a big debate or whatever, an ongoing thing in the space. This is probably, I could be better at this too. I don't love doing cardio. I make sure that I walk a lot. And I think that there's a lot of healthy, very healthy, cardiovascularly healthy individuals who just make sure they strength train and they walk quite a bit each day, who are in a good place. But I think the research and the data would indicate that doing a couple sessions per week, I think the government suggestions are like 150 minutes per week of, that sort of slightly elevated heart rate zone 2 cardio or whatever. And however that looks like to you, whether it's a really brisk uphill walk, a hike, cycling, elliptical, rowing, whatever it may be, whatever's enjoyable to you. Those would be kind of the 3 core fitness things, I think.
Awesome.
And then in terms of nutrition, it would be, pretty simple. From a fundamental level, managing your overall energy intake is like king, right? In order to have a healthy body weight and composition, or I would just say to have a healthy body weight, manage your overall energy intake. And the other things that would feed into that and help you do that would be like getting sufficient protein, ideally kind of on the leaner side mostly, right? And then eating enough, fruits, vegetables, fiber, really. Mm-hmm. Fruits, vegetables are going to help you get more fiber. They're also going to help you remain satiated such that you do maintain or manage your overall energy intake. So I know there's so much nuance to that. It's hard to make it into this, super concise, easy to follow list. But I'd say those are the 3 things from each side. It's like overall movement, some kind of strength training, and maybe a little bit of cardio, a little bit of elevated heart rate if you're not getting that in your lifting, and then managing your overall energy, getting enough protein, and getting enough fruits and vegetables and fiber, even though, we're in a weird time where there's carnivore advocates saying that those are trying to kill you. So I don't know.
Vegetables are the enemy, right? They're trying to put out. Yeah. That's don't get me started on that. That's weird stuff. That's super helpful. I think that's a great place to wrap this thing up. And I'd love to have you back. I think we could do like a Rogan level 3-hour podcast if we just hanging out. But I really appreciate you coming on board. How do people find you? How do people reach out to you if they want to work with you, learn more about you, or whatever?
Yeah, so my Instagram is coach_Ry Hickey, RYHICKEY. And like I said, I coach for a company called Suprahuman. So it's SUPRA human, and it's suprahuman.com. But you can go to my Instagram page for, weekly, bi-weekly videos where I kind of just help people out with all things nutrition, behavior, fitness, etc.
Yeah, your Instagram, I was stalking a little bit the other day, and it's just like it's awesome. There's a ton of great information there, so go follow that for sure. Ry, I appreciate you, man. Have a great day.
Likewise, brother. Thanks, Kevin.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.